Have you been feeling like you're living in a loop? Like it's like the same day repeating over and over again, even if sure things aren't happening exactly the same, but it feels the same, you know? It's like the same old story. I think we all have this, and it makes me think of the movie Groundhog Day, which I don't know when it was out. It was many, many, many years ago. And the funny thing is, actually, when I first saw it, I was on a plane um, traveling somewhere, and it was nighttime or the time that I would normally go to sleep. And so I had the movie on, and then I would fall asleep, and then I'd wake up and see another scene, and it would be like it. I mean, in the movie, if you've watched it, I won't give away too much, but it is the story of a man who's reliving the same day. And so I'd fall asleep and wake up and see the same scene, and it was really confusing because, of course, I didn't really know the story. I didn't know what it was about, and I kept wondering why I'm waking up to the same scene. Anyways, that's aside. But life can feel like that, and I remember feeling really annoyed at that movie at first. For different reasons. And I think part of it was that it actually kind of triggered that feeling of when something feels repetitive and you want to get out of it but you just can't. You're trying all the things but they're not working. And there are times in life when that happens, and I think that movie has a lot of lessons that we can learn from. And so I'd like to kind of talk to those today. And why that came up was I was actually reading a novel that had kind of the same premise where this guy, the character, he's waking up and it's the same day over and over again. And I don't read novels very often, but once in a while I like to pick them up because it just gets me thinking in new ways. Plus, it's fun. It really helps me kind of relax in a different way and get my mind thinking versus watching a movie or something. So I'm reading this book and I'm thinking, you know what? It's interesting that all of these stories that have that as a premise, where there's a loop happening and a person is repeating the day, there is something really interesting about them. They all basically work because the person finally detaches from the scene and it's being repeated. And they realize, like, whatever they do, it's being repeated. And for me, that, I don't know, there was like a light bulb in it because it reminded me, just like in the work of transformation, it's not the outside world that has to change. It's us who change, and we change from within. The power is always there, and that's where it starts. And so from that, I was looking at that piece of detachment. So in all of these stories, it's like the person finally detaches. They realize they're not in control, and this thing is playing out. The scenes are just playing out, and they stop associating with it. That's your first thing. After they kind of wake up to what's happening, because at first they're just frustrated and annoyed and going, "What's going on?" and confused. But once it happens a number of times, it's finally like, "Wait a second," and they start observing. They start watching it. They're not focused on the circumstances anymore. They're not just looking at trying to make something happen. They separate in a particular way by witnessing the scene. And so I invite as I talk about this, to kind of reflect on those parts of your life, perhaps your business, that do feel like they're kind of just going like this, but nothing's really shifting, changing, or growing. So the first is that detachment. It's just starting to see it and stop identifying yourself as it. Okay, see the scene just playing out on its own, and then you are there witnessing it, participating in it, being a part of it in a way, but yet you don't attach, you don't identify. Then what often happens is that the character finally gets tired of trying to like wake up out of that loop, and they decide to now engage with it but change their mind about how they perceive it. They begin to see it as an opportunity. They begin to reclaim their power in it, and they stop trying to change other people or change the end result from happening, immediately, right? Like they stop fretting about it, stop worrying about it, stop stressing about it, and they begin to kind of just play with it into more of an experiment. And the thing with that is, and this happens in real life, is that when we are in that energy of play and experimentation, we learn and see things. We begin to understand sometimes what we're doing repetitively that we haven't been conscious about. And we realize that, you know what, if it's not getting us to where we want, maybe we can just drop that behavior or that approach or that attitude, right? We can let go and then choose with more consciousness how we do want to participate. So the character detaches, they begin to see this as an opportunity instead of the frustration they felt. They stop trying to change the circumstance or other people, like through any kind of force or manipulation exactly. And they begin to respond differently first, right? Even if they desire an end result and they do want somebody to act differently, it is them who they begin to change. And certainly in Groundhog Day, that's what the character that Bill Murray plays, that's what he realizes, that at some point, like, he has to change because who he has been has kept producing the same result. And if he doesn't change, that result will keep looping and repeating. And I find life can be like this. It just kind of can keep you sometimes on this particular cycle because it wants you to wake up to something. It wants you to realize that it's not about you fiddling with all the, how do I change this? How do I change this? How do I make this better? But saying, like, who am I? And who do I actually imagine myself to be? And how is that person relating? Now, I don't like to go into it in too mental a way because honestly, that just feels like more work to do and more stress. But I have been able to create pretty significant shifts at certain parts of my life because I just received what it is that I intended. I just received it, and I went into the state of it's happening. How it's going to happen, when it's going to happen, it doesn't matter. It's happening. And I was finally able to let go of all of that striving and seeking and trying to make the end result change, and instead began to change from within. And then from there, different things have happened. Sometimes, literally, I've had big things just kind of fall into my lap. And I'll share other stories, but this can be like trips, vacations, money, clients for my business, other opportunities. They just kind of fell because it was like I dropped all of the resistance I had to them. I had a kind of detaching. I stopped being fixated on, oh, here's a problem and I've got to fix it. I let go of that. And then I moved into a different state of being. I was able to do that in those situations where I really let go and just kind of really opened to receiving the result that I actually wanted. And also let go of the how. Didn't sit down and create a 10-page plan on what I was going to do next as a result. But as I changed, certain ideas would come to me to do sometimes. And sometimes it did require action. Sometimes I would just get lit up and enthusiastic. And it was because I moved into a different state and that enthusiasm came from within, that then a next step would show up for me to create, to play with, to create. So through that, and in the stories, I'm still early in the novel, so I haven't seen how they're going to sort that out. But other, movies I've watched, it's usually, they just begin to relax in a different way, and they stop. Like it's like if you're, I don't know, in a tennis match, and you're frustrated at that you're not winning, for example, and you're trying to play harder and harder and harder, and all you do is get tired and burnt out, and the other person is still succeeding, right? They're still winning. But because of that effort, it's until you change your energy in it, until you let go and maybe even actually begin to play with it and play in the game, that the result can change, and you can also start winning, and you can start enjoying the experience. And so I invite you to kind of look at anything right now in your world that feels like it's been stuck at a certain level, or in a certain loop of a story, and it's just repetitive, and you're tired of it, you're exhausted, and it's just not producing results, it's not changing anything. And you do have a different idea in mind. You do have a different vision in mind. So the first thing is breathe and just let go in your seat. Just let it go and detach from that current story. It's just like, when you start watching the movie, you just drop and you go on to the next thing. When I stop reading this book, it'll be done and I'll be moving on to the next thing. You just drop it. So that problem doesn't have to exist as a problem, right? Don't interpret it as such, and it won't necessarily be showing up as one. And then after you kind of done that, change your mind that maybe it's okay. You don't have to actually fiddle with the results, but you can move into this space and energy of, what is it that I'd really love? And kind of just be with that. And sometimes, for me, sometimes that can last like 30 seconds. Sometimes it can be for 10 minutes. Sometimes I've been in for a whole day or two. Just this, those wonderful kind of blissful days where we just have shifted and we're not so entrenched. And during that time, it doesn't matter the length of that time. I want to assure you, it doesn't matter if it's little or longer. It's nice when it's long because it just feels good. But you don't have to manipulate it to be longer. You just enjoy it. And then you go on your day with what's next and what's next. Maybe an idea will come through. Maybe you will decide that you want to kind of build some momentum, and so then you focus on an exercise or an activity that gives you that feeling of success, and where you can remain enthused with it, where you can remain curious about what's happening. See, whatever is happening around you is just like a scene in a movie. Just let it be what it is. And begin shifting within yourself. Begin looking at your own transformation. And that's going to happen often very quietly inside. It's just when we stop fighting so much, when we stop resisting our life so much, the things relax. And that letting go, I tell you, has been probably one of the most significant lessons of my life. And while I knew it in my head, I'd heard this, I'd been reading these kind of books for decades, but to actually practice that in real life scenarios, and especially when things do not go our way, that's when we really must practice these things and remember to take things more lightly. And I don't think I'll go into any more examples in this particular video, but I've had more results sometimes show up when I've been in that space than when I worked 10 times harder. It's just blown my mind. And it doesn't mean I'm not doing anything always, right? But it's doing things in a different state where it can actually be fairly relaxed and fairly easy, even if it's intent and focused at times, right? Because that you can be intent and focused without stress. You can actually enjoy that experience. And we actually all seek that experience too, to keep our life lively and engaging. So when you're doing something, you're called to do something and you do it, and then suddenly the energy just goes and you're just not connected anymore, you can sometimes just drop it and move on to the next thing, and then you come back, right? So a lot of what I'm talking about is really again, like not taking things so seriously in terms of like this is set in stone, but just realizing this is a current scene that's playing in that loop in that particular story, and I can detach from it. I can kind of sit back and see it, and then I can operate in this energy, and I get to have control over that. I often tell people, you can just be happy because you want to be happy. You can literally just sit there and go, you know what? I think I feel like I'd like to feel good right now. And just smile or think about something sweet. And just like bask in that for a while. And you're already starting to shift your state. The way you're going to respond to the world is going to be immensely different. You're going to have shifted onto a new track through that moment. And by doing that more and more often, you're going to find that when you are in a state of doing a lot of things, of working more than usual, you might just be flowing with it instead of forcing anything anymore. And guess what? Results will begin to change because you are different. And that new world has to reflect that. So I hope that's been helpful. I'd love to hear any insights that you particularly appreciated today, and if you have any stories of that loop kind of thing happening and what you would like instead now. And if you need some support and you really feel, I've been stuck in this loop for a long time and I've tried all these different things, but it's just not, it still doesn't feel like I'm changing, then I invite you to book a session with me or a couple of sessions, and I will provide a link below where you can do that. And if you want to read some stories about people who I've worked with who actually had those shifts in states step by step and really ended up with major results in some cases that neither of us could explain, then I also have a link below for you to get a free copy at the moment. It's time limited. I'm offering them right now because it just came out, but you're able to do that today. So hope that's helpful, and I'd love to see your comments as well.